Good evening, black people and all allies fighting for black liberation, black prosperity, and black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. When Merrick Garland assumed the office of Attorney General, people like me assumed that he would be about the business of undoing all the damage that Bill Barr had done to the institution. But the latest move by his Department of Justice has people scratching their heads. First, the DOJ has been forced to revise language in a court filing that originally argued that it would, quote, vigorously defend religious universities accused of discriminating against LGBTQ students and shared the same, quote, ultimate objective in a lawsuit over funding for such institutions. LGBTQ activists blasted the language in the initial filing, arguing DOJ's stance went totally against Biden administration's promise to promote gay rights, including the rights of all students to receive an equal education. Also, just this Monday, the DOJ came under fire again for its decision to continue the government's defense of Donald Trump in a defamation lawsuit brought by writer E. Jean Carroll. The DOJ argued that since Trump was an employee of the government when he made the comments that Carroll claims are defamatory, the DOJ and not Trump himself should serve as a defendant in the case. Carroll has accused Trump of sexually assaulting her in the 1990s. But oh wait, there's more. The DOJ is also fighting to keep secret a portion of a memo, some of which was already released, which lays out Bill Barr's justification to clear Trump of obstruction of justice in 2019. Here's how Attorney General Garland defended the Justice Department's recent moves to back Trump-era legal positions when he was asked about it yesterday.
And the essence of the rule of law is what I said when I accepted the nomination for Attorney General. It is that like cases be treated alike, that there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, that there not be one rule for friends and another for foes. The job of the Justice Department is to make the best judgment it can as to what the law requires.
Joining me now to discuss all these, let's say, curious moves is Congressman Mondaire Jones, who is co-chair of the Congressional LGBTQ Equality Caucus and also on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman Jones, thank you for joining me, sir.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So can you help us make sense of Garland and the DOJ's positioning here? Because it strikes many people, including myself, as kind of a more moderate positioning than I was expecting from this DOJ, particularly after Joe Biden's own performance in the campaign and the things that he said.
Well, I think moderate is really a euphemism in this context. I would say retrograde as it concerns LGBTQ plus rights. It is really shameful that we are continuing as a federal government to even defend what is a blatantly discriminatory rule that under Title IX. I mean, there should be no religious exemption, obviously. And this is, as you mentioned in your introduction, just the latest in what is really amounting to a series of problematic decisions this week from the Justice Department. I've been railing against, along with literally, with the exception of one person, every Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, the decision to defend Donald Trump in a private matter where defamation has been alleged against him by a victim of sexual assault. And so we obviously, as a Judiciary Committee, must have an oversight hearing with respect to the Department of Justice. And I've certainly got a lot of questions I want to ask the Attorney General personally.
Let's stick to the LGBTQ issue for a moment. Defenders of the DOJ in this case against the religious schools say that the DOJ is trying to prevent a Christian organization from taking over the defense and mounting an extreme arguments that could lead to devastating subversion of civil rights law. Basically, they're doing this as a protective measure. They say the alternative is almost certainly worse. Do you agree with that?
I don't. I think for the federal government, that, and specifically the Department of Justice, which historically has been a defender of civil rights and has been the conscience really of the federal government and of the nation, to put legitimacy behind this defense through its imprimatur, if you will, or its name, really sends a devastating message. And it is literally the federal government defending discrimination. I would much rather a responsibility like that or an endeavor like that fall to private citizens who want to be ignorant. But really, I mean, especially during Pride Month, the LGBTQ community, to see this, I think, is devastating, and not the affirming, justice-oriented administration that the president said he would oversee when he got elected. And so I would like for them to change their position. But of course, we just have to start with asking them to reconsider.
So at one of the debates, you were speaking of Biden earlier, candidate Biden accused then President Trump of treating the Justice Department like his own law firm regarding a lawsuit that was filed against him by E. Jean Carroll. And he said, kind of mocked him, says, what's that all about? So what's this all about? This is no longer Trump treating the Justice Department like his own law firm. This is the Biden administration's Justice Department. And they're following the same kind of footprint as the Bill Barr Justice Department. Yeah.
Well, let's just be clear about how this thing even originated, right? For people who may not have been paying close attention. This is a woman who has alleged sexual assault against the former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And in response to that allegation, he is alleged to have defamed her by calling her a liar, among other things. And it is now the Department of Justice.
And saying that she wasn't his type.
Right, correct. And now it is the Department of Justice under President Biden that has taken the position that it ought to be the private defense counsel for Donald Trump in a matter having nothing to do with his formal responsibilities or activities in office at the time that he made those statements. So many of us were shocked, as you saw, House Democrats on the Judiciary Committee sent a letter to the Department of Justice asking it to reconsider its position because truly this is not what any of us expected. And I think it really runs afoul of the law. And that is why you've seen the courts up until today say, look, this is something that should be allowed to proceed. And it is something that, that has to be litigated, but not by the Department of Justice.
Just a few weeks ago, activists were patting the Department of Justice on the back because they were rushing in to investigate police departments that were involved in the shooting deaths or deaths of whatever stripe of black people. This has turned that tide completely. What do you think, just as a purely political matter, what do you think this says to all of the voters and the activists who got out to stood in those lines and got people registered and knocked on the doors? What does this say to them?
I think it sends a very contradictory message, to say the least, to people, including members of the LGBTQ plus community and women and justice seekers and civil rights activists and advocates, to see the Department of Justice, on one hand, do the right thing by enhance its investigations of police departments throughout this country that have been engaging in patterns and practices of civil rights violations, and just a few weeks later, really abuse the resources of the federal government for a private matter in the case of defending against the defamation suit against Donald Trump. And I think more egregiously, defending the discrimination against the LGBTQ plus community. We have made so much progress, Charles, as you know, with respect to LGBTQ plus rights, marriage equality, striking down the Defense of Marriage Act, We even got a surprisingly good decision out of the Supreme Court last June with respect to interpreting the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to apply in the employment context. And now we are still discriminating against members of the LGBTQ plus community and the educational context under Title IX. It is such a backwards way of thinking, and I am shocked that anyone in leadership at the Department of Justice would have signed off on something like this.
Lastly, I just want to pull back a little bit, get big picture on this. As you say, the gay community has won quite a few battles recently, big ones. But also, there is kind of an unprecedented push in other areas, particularly against trans people, also around areas of education and participation in sports. And then on the heels of that, there is this. Do you believe that the federal government is doing enough to combat what is happening in the states that is attacking gay rights?
Well, look, I think the answer has to be no, given the position that the administration, specifically Department of Justice, is taking in this Title IX case. We must be clear in all contexts about the need for all Americans to receive equal treatment under the law. That is foundational to our democracy, which, by the way, is under attack as we look at the voter suppression all across this country. And it is something that the president and people in his administration have been championing in rhetoric and also in a number of forward-thinking policies in other contexts. I do want to give credit where credit is due. But we have to be vigilant, especially given the unprecedented assault on members of the trans community and Black trans women in particular, as we look at a lot of the laws that are being enacted, discriminatory laws at the state level.
Congressman Mondaire Jones, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.